Welcome to the Building Web3 podcast. Today we're doing a deep dive into the world of decentralized exchanges with Alex, a key contributor to both Aerodrome and Velodrome. We'll explore the innovative models behind these DEXs and how they're challenging giants like Uniswap by delivering unparalleled performance and equitable value distribution. Remember, nothing stated here is financial advice. Welcome to the Building Web3 podcast. Today with my good friend Alex. He's a contributor to Aerodrome and Velodrome. Alex, before we get too deep into those projects, tell us a little bit about your background. What was your come to crypto moment?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I feel like many people in DeFi, in crypto, right? It was anything but a straight path. I spent some time working in politics and campaigns, spent some time working in tech, working in consulting, and I think I really got hooked 2020 DeFi summer, middle of the pandemic, built a gaming PC, started mining Bitcoin with it, brought that Bitcoin, into Coinbase, swapped it for ETH, brought ETH on chain, started playing around in DeFi, learning all these cool things I could do. And basically just got so excited doing DeFi stuff that I decided to quit my job, initially thinking I'd just be, full-time degen or something like that. But met a bunch of guys and started building. And that's kind of the beginning of the journey to Velodrome and Aerodrome.
All right, now let's talk a little bit about Aerodrome and Velodrome. So let's imagine somebody, they've got some money on Coinbase or they've got a MetaMask wallet, but they're not really in the degen, the trading lifestyle. Tell us a little bit about what Aerodrome and Velodrome are from, the beginner perspective.
Yeah. At the highest level, they're decentralized exchanges, right? So, if you're somebody who's already used Coinbase, used Binance, you certainly know what a centralized exchange is, right? This is a place that you can go and swap tokens, a great like entry or exit point into different DeFi ecosystems. Decentralized exchanges are basically the same idea, but there's no intermediary, there's no custody. These are governed by completely immutable, permissionless code bases, where some people are just there as traders and they're looking to swap tokens. Other people there are there being the liquidity providers, so they're providing the tokens on either side of that trade. And then there's participants who are sort of in many ways facilitating the function of the protocol, right? They're directing the incentives, they're earning the rewards that the protocol generates. And what makes Velodrome, Aerodrome, I think, a bit unique is that, likely you would have heard of something like Uniswap, you might have heard of something like Curve. What Velodrome and Aerodrome do is they take kind of the best aspects of the Uniswap model, the Curve model, a lot of the other innovations you've seen in the space, Convex, Vodium, etc., and it rolls it all into sort of a single streamlined design that provides deep liquidity on tokens and low slippage swaps for traders.
Absolutely. So now that we have the fundamentals as to what Aerodrome and Velodrome are, and even a good explanation into what DEXs are, what brought you to work on these two projects?
Yeah. It all kind of goes back to my own entry into DeFi, right? Where as soon as I got on chain, right, it started being about what can I do on chain, right? I think like most people, you start with relatively easy, accessible things, which is like, hey, I've got some ETH, I've got some USDC. What can I do with these tokens to like earn some rewards, right? So maybe you begin providing liquidity on a DEX, and you're taking on the risk of being the liquidity provider and dealing with issues like impermanent loss. So you're going to be rewarded in some way for that participation. And then it's like, oh, it's crazy. Like I'm earning 25% APR on my ETH and my USDC, And I'm doing this via totally permissionless, decentralized things, right? There's no intermediary here. So then it goes like even deeper. So like Curve was one of my entry points. And what was so novel about Curve is that you could take their token, the CRV token, you could lock that token and use it to vote each week to direct basically incentives to different liquidity pools. But you are rewarded for sort of doing that, which is an essential role, right? In a decentralized system, somebody's got to sort of direct where the rewards go. You're rewarded in like with Curve 50% of the revenue that the protocol creates. So then I'm earning even more rewards, right? I'm not working at Curve. I'm not employed in any way. This is just like I'm participating in a larger system, and this larger system is using permissionless mechanisms to reward me. So I got just really into these models and very excited about what it unlocks, right? Like what a world where you can bring like institutional level scale to market without the value extraction of intermediaries can actually look like. And as I dug more and more into different projects, I think just a number of things ended up coming together such that um, uh, Andre Crone, who is one of the like godfathers of many DeFi protocols, had launched what he thought was like a new next generation decentralized exchange design. And while that design didn't end up having the kind of impact that I guess a lot of us thought it would, the underlying design was really interesting and it was, totally open source. And so it gave an opportunity to me and some other folks to say, hey, I think we could like take the model here. We could improve it in certain ways. We could find an ecosystem that's really in need of that sort of native decentralized exchange liquidity infrastructure, deploy it, and then sort of see what happens. So like that was the journey, is basically playing around so much that you begin to see opportunities, and then like going deeper and deeper, and before you know it, you're building and you're launching protocols.
Yeah, let's talk about some of the innovations that you saw in DEXs, because I think many listeners might be like, oh, it's a place you swap tokens, liquidity providers come in. Let's talk a little bit about, is it the pricing models that improved? What specifically did you see was like the larger improvement that you wished had caught on?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot we could talk about here, right? Like, I feel like modern DEXs, I feel like really started with the design of like Uni V2, right? And this idea of you can provide liquidity at a full range, and your reward back for doing that is the fees generated, by that pool. And this was kind of the beginning of a lot of innovation in the space. And so from there, you saw Curve build a model whereby they mixed the combination of having like a single governance token that supplements the rewards that you can earn as a liquidity provider. That governance token actually has real utility, right? You lock it on chain, and then you're earning a portion of the total protocol rewards. So that was very exciting. And they also built some innovations in the sort of stable swap, because AMM design, this is all just automated market making. Depending on the type of tokens, if they're closely correlated, if they're highly variable, there's going to be different sort of optimizations that you want in that model for that pool to be like highly performative. And so there was just like all these different pieces built by all these different folks that had, I think, very much pushed the AMM space forward. Uni V3 concentrated style liquidity was another big one. But I think what was in many ways missing was that, like, if you were a trader or you were a project or a protocol looking to build liquidity on your tokens, or as a trader tap into that liquidity, a liquidity provider provide it, you don't want to be jumping between three different DEXs depending on the job that you want to do. If you want to participate in these systems, you don't want to own, four different combinations of tokens to participate in these systems. So doesn't it just make sense to take all of those best parts, right? These models that have already demonstrated themselves as being highly successful, to wrap them into a single sort of streamlined design, and one that improves on some of these mechanisms even more, which is creating this great economic alignment amongst those participants. And so I think that's the opportunity that we basically saw, that there was a lot of fragmentation between these models. There was a lot of aspects in how they distributed value that had the opportunity to be optimized even further. And if you build this all together in the right way and you align the incentives in the right way, that basically the sum of these parts could be much greater than each of them individually.
Got it. And now I feel like we have a good understanding of the DEX landscape, kind of some of the advantages of different DEXs. So let's talk about some of the things that Aerodrome and Velodrome have integrated that are kind of taking the best of both worlds from many of these other DEXs that you see out on the market.
Yeah. So, I mean, you probably just want to start at the fact that, yeah, if you look at Uniswap in most ecosystems, right, they're kind of the undisputed, or traditionally have been the undisputed volume kings, right? And that's because they built a model whereby they are able to concentrate the liquidity within sort of tight ranges, which makes it much more performant for traders. So on almost every network that you go to, right, you're just sorting by sort of top volume provider. Uniswap has traditionally been that person. But here's one of the issues with Uniswap. Uniswap has a token, right? The Uni token. But right now, that token doesn't actually have any direct connection to the value generated by the protocol itself. It's a governance token. And even its governance ability is relatively limited because it's not enforcing, it's not, I guess, guaranteed by on-chain rights. So there's been this long conversation in Uniswap of when will they turn on the fee switch, right? So when will some percentage of the value created by the protocol flow to token holders? And every time they seem to get close to holding a vote on it, it mysteriously gets killed and there's no vote. There's all this like behind the scenes stuff. So it's a token that in theory should be at the heart of the protocol, but isn't. So what we thought about is, well, you want to be able to deliver the same level of performance, right, as Uniswap does, right? You want to drive the same amount of volumes. But what you don't want is the situation where there is no direct relationship between the token and the on-chain function of the protocol or the permissionless distribution of like incentives and rewards. So in our model, we combine an adaptation of like the Uniswap AMM. So it's just as, if not more performant than what you see on Uni v3. But all of the fee generation by those pools, rather than going to LPs, rather than, worrying about eventually, maybe you take 10% of that away and send it to the token, all of the fee capture goes directly to token voters. So anyone who takes like their Aero token, locks it, votes each week to direct emissions. All of the rewards go back to the voters, and the voters are sending the token rewards to the LPs. And this creates, I think, just much better incentive alignment between the different participants in the system, between LPs, traders, and those sort of facilitating the function of the protocol, token lockers, token voters.
So a more equitable distribution of the underlying fees generated by the protocol.
Yeah, equitable, and I would say supporting a more healthy and sustainable like economic system. Because the big like question for Uniswap right now, and this isn't something that I'm manifesting. This has been a debate within Uniswap circles for some time. Is that yes, they've got this giant lead in terms of having captured most markets. Not so much on Base because we're there, not so much on Optimism because we're there, but mainnet Ethereum, Arbitrum, things like that. But if they have to take away the amount of value that's flowing to their liquidity providers in order to give some utility to their token holders, right? If they're going to take 10% of those fees, well, you've just dropped the value proposition of providing liquidity on Uniswap by 10% in order to reward token holders. in some way. And so if you are already feeling pressure, from somebody like Aerodrome, in the sense of like Aerodrome's doing 3x over 3x the volume on base. What's it going to mean for you as Uniswap if you have to cut the rewards down even further for LPs? In theory, that makes you even less competitive. And so they're kind of in a tough spot because to fund their operations, right, and to provide something back to token holders, it seems like they're going to have to redirect some of that value. But they're kind of stuck with the economic model that they launched on, right, that they sold investors on, and all this sort of stuff. And so it's complicated, but that's why we wanted to kind of roll out with this bet on token utility, redistribution of all the value, no fee switch, no vote on whether or not eventually some of this will be shared. It's all kind of baked into the economic model from the very beginning.
And so we introduced some new concepts. So Aerodrome, for people that are unfamiliar, is on the base network. Velodrome is on the Optimism network. And talk to us a little bit about why they have why hasn't Uniswap, aside from the economic model, just totally dominated volume the second they went to base or the second they went to Optimism?
Yeah, I mean, they were there before we were, right? And so they even had a head start. I mean, I think it really boils down to the fact that if you can deliver at least parity performance on a pool level, right? So we can deliver the same type of trading execution that they can. And you combine that with a better economic model on top of it, it just becomes very, very difficult, I think, to compete, right? In the sense of we can incentivize these pools, like the wrapped ETH USDC pool, and we can grow market share on that pool. And as that market share grows, that means fewer fees are being generated on Uniswap. Fewer fees means fewer LPs will be there, and more liquidity will be in to migrate to our platform. So like as we grow, we have this kind of virtuous cycle behind us, right? Of more liquidity, more rewards, more fees, kind of feeding the flywheel effect. And the more that we take away from Uniswap, the harder and harder it becomes for that Uniswap pool to compete. And the thing that's really remarkable right now is that Aerodrome hasn't just racked up most of the volume market share on base, but its wrapped ETH USDC pool is now outperforming the wrapped ETH USDC pool on mainnet Ethereum. So it's like very much becoming one of the central places whereby ETH trading activity is happening. Period. I think because of the fact that we've built this very performant iteration on UniV3 and wrapped it around this very good economic model.
Yeah, and I think a question that will come up is like, okay, well, there's Velodrome and there's Aerodrome. They're on two separate chains, but they have similar names. They have similar core contributors. Why two separate DEXs? Why not just Aerodrome that goes on both of these chains under the same name?
Yeah. So I think the best way to think about it is kind of like what are the jobs that these protocols are doing. And the little bit of background, of course, is that if you look at the multi-chain DEX thesis, right, which I think was very popular for some time, I think the idea was that DEXs would be able to basically expand across chains and then see their dominance reflected across all of those chains. But that hasn't actually come to fruition, right? Looking at something like Curve, it's probably like 98% of the activity on Curve is still happening just on mainnet Ethereum, despite the fact that they're on 14 chains. So just deploying chains in multi-chain ways has not been found to be very successful. So then looking at what the opportunity was, what we saw with Base in particular was a few things. One is that they were going to need a sort of central dedicated liquidity layer. And beyond that, I think they were going to need a sort of like economic powerhouse of the ecosystem. And that's because the Base team from the very beginning said, we're not going to have a token, right? And so if you think about what is the role that tokens usually play in ecosystems, it's usually some combination of gas token, governance token, and incentive token. And on base, they've got a gas token, it's ETH. They've got a governance token, it's OP. What they didn't have was the sort of incentive token. And so Arrow had this role to play whereby it is essentially incentivizing activity on the network because we're distributing the token each week to liquidity providers. And of course, anybody who's taking and locking that token is also getting rewards proportional to the activity happening on base generally. So it filled this very, very important, I guess, job to be done within the ecosystem. And I think it will become more apparent with time because Base is, I think, doing something very, very special, something that's unlike anything else we've seen across crypto and DeFi period, which is they are very much looking to bring their user base, their products and services on chain. They want to blur for any user of Coinbase the, I guess, divided nature of, am I using Coinbase or am I interacting with something on chain? And that level of vertical integration from Coinbase through chain requires, I think, that dedicated product that's focused on that deep vertical integration. For Velodrome, it's got a very different job. Initially, of course, it was just the liquidity hub of Optimism network. But the evolution now is across the super chain, where Optimism's vision is that the super chain is really the way in which we scale Ethereum. The big concern or worry right now is, oh boy, there are so many new L2s. Is this just breaking up Ethereum? Is it making liquidity too spread out? Is this a major problem? And Optimism's answer to that is no, because we need that block space, right? We need it to be optimized for different use cases like social, DeFi, NFTs, all that sort of stuff. If we're going to get massive scale, right, we need people to be able to build great products and very performant chains. But the job to be done is to connect all of those chains together in a way that feels as cohesive as when you're using the internet, where you don't know what underlying protocols you're using when you're interacting with a website. You just know you're online, right? And so for Optimism, their big job right now is to onboard as many chains as possible. And I think you've seen a lot of exciting ones like Mode, Fractal, Zora, WorldCoin. There's a lot of very exciting ones to come. But Velodrome's job is not to so much specialize in any of those chains, right? It's not to sort of tap into that sort of verticalized offering like what Coinbase is doing. It's to go as wide as possible across those stacks of chains and tap into this interoperability framework to connect together the liquidity so that it really does feel like a seamless experience regardless of which chain that you are on.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that because that's a very interesting concept. We have, of course, there's chain fragmentation itself, there's liquidity fragmentation, and the vision is such that a user would be able to have coins on some other chain within that Optimism framework, and it wouldn't really matter on what chain it exists. They would just be able to use it throughout the ecosystem. It's like my mom doesn't know a website uses MongoDB. She doesn't care. It just works.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So let's talk a little bit because the future of Aerodrome is based on, of course, Optimism and Base. I think we probably had to talk a little bit more about kind of the Base vision and how it differ from Optimism's vision, or is it just one of the sub chains of Optimism's great super chain model?
Yeah, I mean they're in total alignment, right? The Coinbase and Base teams and the OP Labs, OP Foundation teams are working in tandem. And I think the nature of the relationship is actually very, very interesting. So the Base team, of course, in Coinbase, they have this vision, of course, to bring their business on chain. And, I think this isn't them playing around on chain. They believe it's essential for their business to move on chain, to be on chain. This is a necessity to them. So in doing that, though, they could have done this in a number of ways, right? They could have built their own chain. They could have been an alternate layer one, right? They could have integrated into an existing chain. They had all these different ways that they could go about it. But they chose to, and I think are very values aligned with Ethereum, right? That they want to build on this incredibly neutral platform that with all of the security and safety assumptions associated with it. Um, so like they first make that choice of, all right, well, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this in alignment with Ethereum. So then, we're going to build an L2. Well, do you want to build that L2 from scratch? Or once again, do you want to sort of opt into something even bigger? So I think that's why they went down the direction of Optimism. Here's a team with not only deep values alignment, I think, with the base team and with Ethereum as a whole, but who seemingly have built the single best roll up stack and made it possible to participate in um, uh, this these broader network effects that are going to come with the super chain. So for them, I think it's very much about like it helps them to be able to like take some tech off the shelf to have these like close technology collaborators with OP Labs to inherit upgrades and contribute to the full stack just by virtue of their participation. For them not to need a token or governance, right, to manage upgrades to the chain, to have that, be handled by Optimism, to contribute just a portion of their sequencer revenue back to things like retroactive public goods funding, which is very much designed to help continue to fuel the economic flywheel. And then, of course, to over time tap into the network of super chains, because I think Base will be, incredibly excited if, as they bring their users on board, their users are able to not just tap into the products and services that are built on base chain, but if somebody builds a really killer gaming application that is living on the super chain, that it's virtually seamless for them to be able to get over to participate in that, or tap into Zora and NFTs. And so I think they very much see themselves as certainly a leading hub within the super chain, but one that has a ton to benefit from the Ethereum alignment, the alignment with Optimism itself, and then, of course, alignment with the increasing network effects of all the different players who are opting into building on the superchain.
And we would bucket this into the idea of innovation as chain abstraction.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about we talked with Moonwell about the Coinbase smart wallet and kind of how that's improving the ability to get users on chain. Like my mom doesn't need to know about MongoDB. She just needs to know that it works. And we kind of
Yeah.
had to have blockchain fade into the background. Talk a little bit about some of the innovations you see coming out of like these like smarter wallets and how they're helping, say, Aerodrome or Velodrome.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is funny. Like, I have this picture. Like, I know Jesse from the base team pretty well at this point, but I have this picture of him where he is literally out there every single day trying to get his friends and family on chain. Like, I even heard rumors that he got like 5 to 10 people on chain for the first time in their life while on his honeymoon, right? So he's out there every day trying to find a way to get people on chain because he does believe, that on chain is like our generation's version of online, and eventually everybody will be on chain, in one way or another. Uh, but what I think that inspires in Jesse is anytime he hits a pain point in that process of onboarding, somebody like his grandma or a stranger he meets, anytime he experiences that friction, he comes back into the base team and into the Coinbase team and says, here's another friction point that we need to solve for, right? Here's something that is not easy right now. It's cumbersome right now. It's confusing right now. So we need to fix this if we're going to like get these people on board. So that's where I think things like Coinbase Wallet definitely come into play. And yes, it is a remarkably easy customer journey from I want to interact with something on chain and I've got a wallet and I've got it funded and I'm using it, right? It's just so fast, so easy. But I think that's just the tip of the spear in terms of the types of things that Coinbase is going to be solving for. And I think they're not just solving it for like end users or mass market, but for institutions as well. You see a lot of cool like products like Blackbird that is all about payment infrastructure for restaurants, and the way in which obviously on-chain payments, transactions, attestations, all this stuff can not only save them money but time and provide a better overall experience. But like the most recent thing that they've been talking a lot about is like forex trading, which is a massive, massive, unbelievably large market, right? And that truly, like on-chain rails, if liquidity exists for all these different currencies, and it's very, very easy to swap between them, and gas fees are low, then on-chain should win. And Jesse Base and the Coinbase team is going to be as focused on solving the issues for major institutional players who clearly want this. They want to be able to trade. They do it every day, and would jump at any opportunity to do it cheaper, faster, always on, right? And they're going to solve those problems such that that these industries of massive, massive scale begin to live more and more and more on chain. And that's what we're so excited about, because fundamentally, if you are a decentralized exchange, you're really just infrastructure for everybody else building everything else, right? If Blackbird is facilitating payments and transactions, and they're doing it, say, in the U.S. and in Europe, so you have people who want to go from Circle's Eurocoin to USDC. That liquidity needs to flow through a pool. So our pools will hopefully be the infrastructure for that. If you're a forex trader who's looking to go from USDC to euro to any other currency, right? We're not going to build the front end for that, right? Like we're not going to probably build a lot of the products around it, but the ecosystem that develops around it will hopefully operate, on our rails. And I think that's just very, very exciting, because it just unlocks like orders of magnitude of potential growth for our ecosystem. And this is why, of course, I think Coinbase and Base sees it as a complete necessity, for them, for their business and their industry that it services to win.
Yeah, I have to say it's a very exciting future, and people that well, everyone here is a believer. But if retail users in the future are listening to this and they're unsure about like why forex is even an issue, like I pay my rent here in USDT in Medellin, Colombia, and it's just so much easier than sending Wise payments or PayPal. And oh my god, it's absolutely horrible, the
Yeah.
money transfer.
Yeah, and that's the sort of stuff, right? When people get maybe more bearish or cynical, that's always just helpful for myself, is that it is, the tech is just better. It does allow you to do things without the value capture of intermediaries that is either impossible, or there's a ton of friction, or there's a ton of value extraction right now, right? It already unlocks that. And so it's really just about how do we continue to build on top of that. And in society and the evolution of technology, as soon as there is a better way to do something, it's just a matter of time before it's adopted. We don't go backwards. We don't go to heavier, weightier, more expensive, more intermediary, more value take. Like as soon as a better path is identified, it's just a matter of like how quickly do we get there. And I think that's basically what's happening with crypto right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And what are the goals of this podcast is to get more builders into the space, get more founders. Is there a big challenge in Web3? Maybe it's in the base ecosystem, maybe it's in Optimism, maybe it's just abroad, that you see where you're like, I wish if I wasn't working on Aerodrome or I wasn't working on Velodrome, I would love for someone to solve this problem.
Mm. I mean, it's less anything like hyper specific. It's just probably more that it feels like there is so much open terrain. What the technology unlocks, right? And I gave a talk at Basecamp, which was the Coinbase's team or the Base team's big developer conference, and I talked a bit about this. But what the technology unlocks is institutional level scale business or massive business level scale. Um, entirely basically through immutable code bases. So if you think about taking like organizations with hundreds, thousands of people, HR departments, marketing departments, all this sort of weight, right? Legal, all this sort of stuff. And you can just boil that whole thing down to code. It's insane to think about the potential that creates. And so what I am just so interested in is like, what kind of novel, new, and interesting things are people going to do with that, right? And I talked about Blackbird as a great one. I think there are so many things that in the real world right now, just like in the pre-internet or pre-Web 2 sort of era, they're old, they're slow, they're clunky, they distribute value in ways that are very disproportional or inequitable. And so I'm just very excited about, people who are going to find ways to leverage the technology to provide, products and services that just look fundamentally different than anything we see right now. And I think my only push would be like, I'm not telling you to go in any particular direction or solve any particular problem, but my push would be do it in a way that's very much aligned with DeFi principles. I think one thing that is a bit out of whack in the industry today is that most people are building projects, protocols, and tokens that are primarily engineered towards exit events. It is actually kind of recreating the intermediary system that we've seen in previous models, whereby a privileged few get to buy in early into some sort of pre-sale, VC funded. The token doesn't have any real utility, and thus all of the incentives are there for investors and team to have like an exit event, and then they're set for life, and then everything sort of fizzles out. So my only push is like, if you are going out there and you're thinking about building something, don't just sort of apply the Web3 principles to the actual work, but in actually how you design the thing and whether or not you choose to raise, what the token actually does, and all that sort of stuff. Because I think if you use Web3, if you use crypto, if you use DeFi to incentivize yourself and all participants for longevity, you get better outcomes than if you give everyone an incentive around, when's my exit.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that. I often, Web3, of course, they love tokenizing things, but sometimes I think it's to the point that it's detrimental, where it'd be like, imagine AWS credits had a secondary market and was constantly fluctuating in value. Like, what lunacy are we doing here? But of course, there's
100%. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit, circle back to Aerodrome and Velodrome, talk a little bit about some of the milestones and features that people can kind of see coming up on the horizon, if you can talk about any.
Yeah, of course. So on the base side and Aerodrome, I think we're very, very excited about the continued growth of base itself. Base is like just over a year old right now, and it's already on many metrics the top layer 2 in Ethereum. And by the end of the year, it's going to be fully stage 1 decentralized, which I think is going to unlock even more growth as folks who are still on layer 1 now have another major reason why they can feel safe and secure moving to a layer 2. They continue to push down gas fees to make it even cheaper, faster, easier, right to interact. And so like on the Aerodrome side, we've had tremendous success, I think, kind of growing our share of the total activity on chain. And I'm just so excited by what happens when even more of the projects building on layer 1 on alternate layer ones, on Arbitrum, fill into the base ecosystem. And we sort of continues this sort of parabolic growth that it's been on. And that's when we get into this sort of stuff of like Forex being possible on chain and all of this crazy stuff. Like I very much think Base wants to be the place that you trade everything. Like even if you're trading Solana, we want you doing it on Base. Right? If you're trading currencies, we want you doing it on Base, and that's super exciting. So I think the ecosystem on the Base side is going to continue to grow, and we're going to continue to grow to sort of service it. On the Velodrome side, I think what we're really excited about is the super chain. There's over 40 chains currently committed to the super chain. I think only about half of them are public. The early beginnings of interoperability between super chains, we expect to start coming online by the end of the year. And Velodrome in the next few months here will be rolling out its initial 1.0 version of interoperability, which will allow it to extend across a bunch of these chains like Mode, Build on Bitcoin, Fractal, Rollcoin, and others. And so that's going to be very, very exciting because that's the beginning of this realization, right, of abstracting these chains away and tapping into each of these ecosystems that are all trying to bring their unique spin on what you can do on chain, how you distribute the value, all that fun stuff. And it's going to be great to just be a part of that field of experimentation as Velodrome.
Well, it's very exciting stuff. So call out real quick where people can connect when use these projects. Where can they use Aerodrome? Call out any URLs. Of course, everyone be cautious. I'll put them in the description as well. And call out your social media so that people can connect with you online.
Yeah. On Twitter, we're Velodrome Phi and Aerodrome Phi. So definitely check us out there. I'm Wake Me Alexander. You can definitely find me that way. And then, yeah, if you want to sort of go straight to the D apps, aerodrome.finance, velodrome.finance. Obviously, on Twitter, you can find a link to our Discords if you want to get sort of more engaged in our community. We're on Warpcast, we're on DBank. Find us probably anywhere you find anything. But yeah, definitely dig in. I said when I got started in DeFi, it was just because I just started playing around with things. And, if all of this is very unfamiliar to you, I can just say, it's very fast and cheap using L2s these days. It's a great way just to play around and see what way, form of participation is most exciting to you. And then, like me, you never know where that's going to go, right? Might just start snowballing.
Absolutely. Well, let's get involved with Aerodrome and Velodrome, connect with Alex online, and let's continue to build the future of Web3.